Good day to everybody. I'm Rory McNamara, and I'm going to be your chair for today, fielding questions, which will go to our panelists. Lee Smith, Chairman of the Plumbing Industries Registration Board, and Steve Brown, who is the Acting Executive Director of the Institute of Plumbing. And it's really great. We've had an absolutely outstanding response here. So we're looking really forward to all of you being involved. It would be quite nice if during the whole thing that we go on, we just identify your regions and just to know that where we're coming from. Durban guys, we share with you your pain with the flooding. I believe that the fish are eating the mangoes. That's what Steve tells me. So please, be with us, and we know where you've come from. Now, I think as a start, it would be quite nice if, because a lot of the questions that have come in, pre-questions, refer to what PIRB is about and what our ops is about. So I think let's kill a couple of questions from you guys in terms of asking, and let's ask Lee Smith, the Chairman of the Plumbing Industries Registration Board, to talk basically about what PIRB is about. And Lee, some of the questions that come out, about points and categories, and are you limited to certain categories, and why must I register with the PIRB, and why must we pay for CPD, and when must we issue COCs? So I think that will knock off quite a few. And the other question which has come up here is how has PIRB made itself accessible to the plumber who do not own smartphones, laptops, and have access to this kind of equipment? So do you want to kick off there, and then we'll go to Steve afterwards for Institute of Plumbing. Over to you, Lee.
Well, thanks a lot, Rory. Thanks for taking time out and facilitating this specific process. I'd just like to welcome everybody to the session. Thank you very much for joining us, guys. I think it's important that the questions get asked and answered. And that's important. That we get that information out there, because there's a lot of miscommunication, misunderstanding, and that gets passed on from one person to the next, and then that gets changed, and you get the telegraph line and whatever it is. So we actually put this session together to actually come and assist people, or assist the industry to understand much better from that perspective. As Rory, I just want to quickly touch base. Rory, you threw a whole lot of questions at me. So, in my old age, I'm not going to remember. I remembered one of them.
That's pretty good. Okay. So we're looking at one of the questions were around how to get the points. Any of the three categories, or not limited to certain activities. Why must I register with the PIRB? Why must we pay for CPD? And when must I issue a COC? Are you getting these, Lee?
Okay. And yeah, I'm getting them, but let's just start off with a simple one. What is the PIRB? Who is the PIRB? What's the difference between the PIRB and IOPSA? So I've actually got a slide up on that specific thing. So let me just quickly bring up the slide for everybody. And guys, we might just switch our webcams off for a little bit just now, just to speed up the process. I'll watch what the bandwidth is doing on this specific side. But it seems to be a little bit okay. Guys, we encourage you to send your questions in. There's a little question bar down at the bottom, as Rory indicated earlier. Also, just indicate where you come from. Have a go at it. But let us know where you're from: Durban, Pretoria, Cape Town. I'm sitting in Pretoria, yeah, in Centurion. Steve down is in Glue Glue Land. There we go. Brian from Pretoria, Aaron from Cape Town, Frederberg, William. How's it, William? Quite a regular character there. All right, Cineville. How's it, Samuel? So we've got a few people there. From a promised land. Oh, there's Robert, our Victoria chairman. How's it, Robert? Anyway, great, 100%. So let's have a look. What is the difference between IOPSA and PRRB? So and maybe a little bit further where that's on the next slide there. So I don't really have this in order. So in 2006, through the auspices of the Institute of Plumbing of South Africa, the Plumbing Industry Registration Board was conceptualized. And one of the questions that have been asked is why must I register? You know, why is there this register? Now, if we go back most probably about 20 years. I could be wrong. We used more than 20 years, 25 years. Each municipality used to register plumbers in South Africa. They used to maintain a register, and the old guys can quickly advise on that specific what date that was. But all those registers fell away. All those registers, barring two that we are fully aware of, and that was the city of Cape Town and eThekwini. Is that correct, Steve? eThekwini, Durban. Those are the only two maintained registers. We can debate if they maintained, but they're the only registers left in South Africa. So when all the registers were kicked out, it was basically a free fall in the industry. You know, who was who was who. Who in the zoo, we didn't know that. You know, who was plumbers, who was not plumbers, and that's when, in my opinion, is one of the biggest declines that we had, and the industry just went down for it because then everybody called themselves a plumber, right? And there was no live register that the guys could verify. So ultimately, a guy would rock up at site. What he would show is he would show his certificate that has been copied 6 times over. You know, and it's been dragged through the hedge backwards and forwards, and then you have the certificate, and now the building control officer on site would now make a judgment that this guy is actually a registered or a qualified plumber. He didn't do a verification against it. Anyway, so to cut the long story short, the Institute of Plumbing said, you know what, we need to create a register for the industry as a whole, and not just for the metros. So through the auspices of the Institute of Plumbing, they created a non-profit organization called the PRRB. A delegation went to Australia because the Institute of Plumbing is part of the World Plumbing Council. They went out there and they had a look at a model, and they actually brought it back, South Africanized it, changed it because the conditions are slightly different in South Africa, the way in which we trade and all that stuff, and our standards are different. And the PRRB was conceptualized from that perspective. And this was all the way back in 2007, 2008, when it officially came on board. So as I said, the PRRB is a non-profit organization. In other words, we're not there for profits, same as the Institute of Plumbing, right? And the questions, let me just go back 2 slides here. So let's get asked, what's the difference between IOPSA and the PRRB? So the main difference is that the Institute of Plumbing is a member organization. In other words, a voluntary organization where you as a member, a company, it's a company, they can pay your membership fee, and you can belong to an organization that looks after the interests of the plumbing in South Africa, or you as a plumber. The IOPSA does a whole lot of things, such as sit at the SABS, they represented at the various qualification boards, they deal with the insurance sector. So there's a whole lot of stuff that they do on behalf of the plumbing sector. The industry, the PRRB, so to draw an analogy, the PRRB is a register of individuals, where the PRRB was a company, right? The PRRB is that individual that works within the company, right? And that individual is measured against his qualification or his competency, if you want to put it that way. So you got your qualification whenever through the SAQA, you did your trade test, whatever it is, you obtained your qualification through the accredited process, and then based on that, you come and register at the PRRB based on that qualification that you had. Very similar to, let's go back to the old municipality. The old municipalities, you used to go to the municipality, you show them your qualification. At that point, they carried out a trade test, if I can remember that far back, or they might have tested you, and you would have been registered on that specific municipality. And as I said, That is not in existence anymore other than Cape Town and eThekwini, Durban. All right. So just to go back another 2 slides here, I'm just going to quickly jump here. So just going back to the PRRB again, people are asking, well, who is in control, who runs the PRRB? So it's a non-profit organization, registered at CIPRA as a non-profit organization. It's got a constitution and it's governed by an executive, 9-executive member organization, and they're the representatives. So we have 4 representatives sitting on the board from the plumbing sector, right, be it employer or employees, 2 representatives from government, such as the Department of Water Affairs, SABS. There is JASWIC from the JASWIC or the manufacturing sector, from the distributors, from the educators, and we have people coming in from the insurance sector that sits on that specific board. The board meets, I think, once a quarter, if I can recall it correctly, and they govern the process through the PRRB from there. Currently, the board has just been renewed. In other words, there was communication sent out to the sector. We received nominations. It went to the nominations committee, and that board has just been newly elected. So there's the next 4-year terms that will go through that specific sector. So I know that's great, Rory. Okay, so that was a lot of stuff thrown in there. So if we can go back to
the questions coming up now, so I can see we're going to dwell quite a bit on PIRB. Can I just move to Steve? For those who've just joined us, welcome, guys and girls. Steve is Acting Executive Director of the Institute of Plumbing, and he's just going to explain the role of IOPSA in the whole setup. Over to you, Steve. Steve?
Yeah, just switch your microphone on, Steve. There we go. Steve,
right, are you there?
There we go.
There you are.
Right, are you there? Okay, you see, that's what happens when I listen to Lee. He tells me to switch things off that I shouldn't. All right, guys, thank you very much for coming out tonight, Rory and Lee. I think it's an exciting time that we can sit down and discuss both PIRB and IOPSA. So from my side, IOPSA established in 1989. I think, in terms of what we do, and I've just got a couple of slogans, IOPSA is pulling industry together for the betterment of industry and all South Africans. I think it's the key that IOPSA is the catalyst when it comes to plumbing and all things plumbing. 1989, I was involved, and many other guys have been too. We had no voice. There was no voice. We were not communicated with. We were basically a non-existing entity. When I look at where we are today, in terms of our roles within industry, we are dealing with building control officers on a daily basis, sitting with NAM and various training boards with regards to training. We now have input in terms of the training of what we believe a plumber should have and the type of training done. Working with the energy, EWCTA, the energy sector. We have voice in terms of SAPS, which is again what we touched on in terms of assisting with standards. We're currently very involved in terms of the South African Institute Insurance Association. We have the manufacturers meetings. We basically provide technical support, business support, training support. We're currently working with the Department of Higher Education. We're working with NAM. We basically are part and parcel in terms of arbitration between the consumer and some of the unscrupulous contractors that are out there. A large percentage of our complaints that come through on a daily basis or pertain more to non-registered or even members of IOPSA that come through. In terms of our associations with IOPSA, manufacturers, merchants, plumbers, associate members. Today I was having a discussion with the South African Institute of Architects where they are exploring communications with IOPSA. And basically, as you know, just touching on terms of where we are, again, as Lee said earlier with WPC, we assist in terms of technical articles. I think on a daily basis, we communicate and assist plumbers in terms of queries from finance to getting paid to interpretation of standards. And then our representation, from the Western Cape to East London, Down in the Mossel Bay, George area, we've started out some satellite branches. So we have representation of the sub-coordinates in Knysna, in Port Elizabeth, KZN. We have representation up in Belito, up in Zululand, as well as in Durban. In the Free State, we're very active in terms of the Free State. And next week I'll be up in Welkom. So that goes back to a question that was raised in terms of what do we do about those outlying areas. And we have started to identify that in terms of trying to get out to those other areas where we understand the guys can't get to meetings in the larger areas. And to substantiate that, we had a business breakfast sponsored by one of our members in the Northwest region, which was basically like a boss's breakfast, and obviously Gauteng. 98% voluntary. If I look at all of those areas, from the chairman right the way down to the technical, all of these guys are volunteers giving up their time freely. So, yeah, all things in terms of IOPSA, Rory, I think there's a huge amount that's there. But I think, in essence, when we look at IOPSA, it's all things plumbing. And I think the key thing between the PIRB and IOPSA is that the mandate of the PIRB, as he said, is registration and monitoring based on the certificates of compliance. And basically that information comes through to IOPSA in terms of where the guys are failing in terms of not understanding standards or whatever. And through that, and based on that information, our training teams, our technical teams basically deliver and develop training material to assist in terms of direct areas that we know the guys are failing. So if we just take the example, the guys go on about geysers all the time, but we know 2001, it was law, you must do that. 16 years later, we still can't get it right, and we see it every day. And the concerning part is, as we had in Gauteng the other day, when we see some of these pictures that go up on the wall of shame, it's a laugh, and the guys do laugh about it. But what we need to understand is that there are implications in terms of non-compliance. And what we are trying to do through all of these policies is educate the consumer, educate the building control officers in terms of plumbing, bearing in mind that we don't have building control officers that understand plumbing per se. So that's just me in a little bit of a nutshell, Rory, in terms of what we're doing. I'm sure there's a few items that I haven't included on there, but I think I'd need 2 hours to go through everything. But that's just touching base.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you. We've had a request, Jeff, we can turn off the cameras because it's causing a huge lag. Can we do that, Lee?
Yeah.
No, that shouldn't be a problem. That's not a problem.
Okay, let's go. And these, all of them. Is that a bit better, Tony? No, you can't hear me. I mean, I can't hear you.
Tony will just put up his hand. We'll let you know.
Yeah. We just go up a bit, yeah. All right, I think we have a question which is also relative to part of the questions that I asked initially, Lee. What is the reason as to why the full amount of CPD points cannot be carried forward?
Okay, Rory, thanks for that, Rory. And I see Samuel just said to us that we're not supermodels anyway. Well,
thank you very much, Samuel.
Thank you, Samuel. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So we're a horror movie, are we?
Yeah.
Okay, so Rory, I think one of the questions that came through, we must understand that the CPD. So let's just talk a little bit about the CPD. So in that specific question, so just to get a bigger idea about. So part of the PIRB's process is that we became a professional body, and the professional body was set up by SAQA. Well, the professional body, the requirements. All requirements for that was, let me just quickly get to that slide, and I can actually show it to you. And a lot of people are asking us, well, who made us the right to do that and all that stuff. So I've actually got a slide here, which I'm going to put up, and I've just got so much stuff on my screen here. I just can never get to there we go. So there we go. So this is a policy document that was set up for anybody, any organization or anybody who would like to become a professional body. They had to meet certain criteria. There is the website for anybody that can go and download that specific document, and they can actually go and research and find out information about it. It's a policy set by the South African Qualifications Authority, which sits under the National Quality Framework Act. Right? There's the website. There's the email address if you want to ask people about the professional body, or if you want to ask about the PRRB as a regulatory body. And there's the switchboard number. So, because we get a lot of people asking as well, who put us in that, who gave us that authority and all that stuff. So I just wanted to put it out. So we became a professional body about 5 years ago. I think it was 5 years. We just had our review now, just came up for review again, which there's an extension on that one. And the professional body was about exactly that. You had to have a register within, and it's all about maintaining the expertise within the sector. And part of that maintaining the expertise within the sector is continuous professional development. Now, continuous professional development is you know, we train every single day. I mean, we ask questions to the plumbers when we ran a CPD workshop there, you know, probably about a month or two ago, and we asked them, we says, do you actually train every day? Do you believe training is important? Everybody says yes. And the reality is we train every single day. So the CPD is just a formalization thereof, a formalization of your training. To say, hey, I am a qualified plumber. I've been in the sector for 30-odd years. 30 years ago, you were still doing galvanized pipe, right? But now I've done training sessions and whatever it is, and I've now moved over to new technology. And I'm showing you my competency. And that's all what CPD is about. CPD is just about showing you your competency in the sector. Because, and I think what's important, and I should have started off with this, Rory, is that, you know, when we think about anything, the PRRB, we always ask and we always question about me. Why do I have to do it? But you must understand, put yourselves in the sector's shoes. We've got to look at the sector as a whole, as a bigger sector. We can't just say, well, you know, it's inconveniencing you, so you should. We have to look at it from, because, I mean, the analogy that I use is that, you know, everybody calls themselves plumbers. So Mrs. Jones uses a plumber down the road. He's not qualified, he doesn't know anything, and he messes up. He totally stuffs up the job. Does she say, hey, that guy down the road? Or does she generalize in saying the plumbing sector? She generalizes in saying the plumbing sector. So as a sector, we need to uplift ourselves. We always continuously ask for more money. We always continue to say, get rid of the bucky plumber, right? What's the definition of a bucky plumber? In my opinion, is anybody who prices it more than what I priced is a bucky plumber, right? So it's important that the sector needs to uplift itself as a whole, not as, and CPD is part of that process. Now, CPD is nothing new to us. Every professional sector has some form of CPD in that. Now, going back to your question about the carrying over of the points, this is new to the sector as well. And there was a question that came from one of the individuals. I can't remember his name, and he used the word fluid. Yes, the CPD is a fluid thing at this period because we're bringing it in new into the sector. So one of the things that did come out is that the guys were asking us is, well, you know what, we maintained all these CPD points, can't we carry them over to the next year? So yes, it came up to the committee. It has been advocated a couple of times. The review committee looked at it and said, you know what, it is worth it. You know, we looked at it, and there's a recent change in the communication, the CPD policy, where a certain percentage of your CPD points can be carried over to the next year. And we did listen to the sector, came back again, the committee reviewed it and did it and changed it. So yes, you can't carry all your CPD points over. I think it's 33%, 1/3, that you can carry over to the new year.
Right. Thanks, Lee. I think that answers the one question. And I'm going to bounce back to Lawrence again, who asked another question, which I don't think we're going to have a discussion about. He raised the point about why are his emails not responded to. Lawrence, fair question, but I think we're not going to have a general discussion about that. Lee, can you pick this up, please?
Well, I'll pick it up. Right. So I looked at that question as well.
We will address that for you. Now, the other question here, and it's coming up with the question on the screen, and it's about why must we pay for CPD? And Henry has asked for, to get one CPD point, I have to pay over 2,000 Rand. Why is it so expensive?
Okay, so I can't comment on the gentleman's 2,000 Rand, but it's not the case. I'd like to get some more information about. But just take, for instance, tonight, Rory, this webinar is free, and each person is getting, I think, 1 CPD point. You can get all your CPD points for free.
Yeah.
You don't have to spend 1 cent. Just go and look at the way in which the CPD point is structured. I mean, there was a gentleman the other day that required, he said that he did some community work, and he was issued CPD points for that. Attending an IOPSA meeting, if you go to a training provider, like a certain manufacturer's benchmark course, right? And they are accredited for CPD points, you can get those CPD points for that. But you must just ask the question. There's no ways that you have to pay for it. The cost of the CPD points, well, I mean, Rory, I think that's a pretty difficult, because I think what you must understand is that it's not the PRRB that offers the CPD. They might have 1 or 2 programs that are running it, but they're external. They are external parties that do that. So it might be a manufacturer that's doing a CPD program that they're offering for free. But there might be a training provider that's offering a CPD program that needs to recover its cost because it's offering a venue or whatever it is. But the plumbers must choose which one they go to. It doesn't say you have to attend a webinar. It didn't say you have to go to QuickArts XYZ training. Nowhere is it sitting. You still have the choice in doing your CPD. So you must make the choice. And every sector. Yes, Rory? Sorry.
Thanks, Lee. Heinrich, could you please let Lee know who's charging this amount? And I think Lee has more than explained it. And I hope that everybody understands that CPD points are not necessarily a cost. So, and Lee's point is that you have a choice. So you need to actually investigate that because there's lots of ways that you can actually get CPD points for nothing. So, Henry, if you could please let the PIRB know who charged that, so we can just look at it and have a discussion with the folks. I hope that's okay. Lee, just on CPD and a little bit more down to the issue. What is the difference between a PIRB COC and a municipal or a municipality COC?
Okay, Rory, I think it's a very good question. This comes up. This comes up a lot. And again, so let's just be clear so maybe just take one step back. To issue a certificate of compliance, why would one issue a certificate of compliance? Is because you as an individual are taking accountability for your work. Agreed? So you as the competent person are signing off the certificate saying that I, Lee Smith, have completed this installation and have done it. Correct in saying that? And therefore possibly open myself up to a recourse. Okay. So now if that is the case, I mean, there was a gentleman here that's saying that any Tom, Dick and Harry can sign off the COC. Well, what's the point? There's no value in that certificate. There's no value in that COC that's issued. The COC gets issued in, we know that the COC gets issued in the city of Cape Town. Now, has anybody actually gone and actually looked at that certificate? Has anybody ever actually seen how you can obtain that certificate? You can literally download the certificate. So there's no value behind that certificate that gets issued because there's no accountability in the process from that. So yes, there is a massive difference between the PRRB COC and the municipal COC. And that being is that because we have an accountable process behind that whole COC. You get audited. If you found that you have done it incorrectly, you get held accountable to rectify that thing. Because if you're just a wishy-washy guy and just signing off COCs, what's the point?
Lee, I can just jump in there. Sorry, Rory, just to emphasize what Lee's saying, just to give you an example. Today, I have two inquiries that have come through from the City of Cape Town where the consumer is now challenging the certificate of compliance because they feel that, and they know after inspections have been done, that the plumbing is non-compliant, and they're now looking at that legal sort of recourse for that. And one basically asking for an independent inspection of the works done. So I think that it's very, in terms of City of Cape Town, that COC is for the sale of properties, does get people into trouble. And because of the way that it's set up, it comes across as being the interpretation of the consumer is that all the plumbing is correct, but when you look at the COC, it's very ambiguous in terms of what's there. Thank you, Rory. Sorry.
Oh, thanks. And that is, there is that big difference. There is another question. Why does City of Cape Town CPD COC count for CPD points? Well, they're two different. COCs. So I think
Rory,
answered, yeah.
Yeah, Rory, can I just quickly jump in there, because I see one of the questions that came in there is that they're saying, well, why don't the various municipalities recognize the COC, or not the COC, the PRRB registration, all that stuff. So I want to take that from a different angle. Let's just put the PRRB registration process aside. Let's say the PRRB wasn't about. So for those who know or don't know, SANS 10400 A18, right? And it's a very good, just remember A18, the National Building Regulation says that you must be a trained plumber, or in terms of the Manpower Act, in other words, the Red Seal, the learnership, the A18, Section 28, whatever the way you got your qualification, you must be a trained plumber, or people working on the installation must be adequately supervised by that trained plumber. So if that is the case, then why have we got so many people that are unqualified and working in the sector, or working on building sites, or working with the building control officers? When it's been a regulation, it's been there, right? So now I'm going to go back to my question. Let's bring the PRRB back in again. So people are asking, why aren't they asking for it? It's because the people don't know about it. They are ignorant to the fact, and they don't understand that the laws have changed. Right? There is regulations that call for the certificate. They don't understand that, and we've got, Steve mentioned it earlier, we have training programs that we are educating the building control officers throughout the country, bringing them aboard and telling them there's regulations that have changed. There are standards that require you to issue the certificate of compliance from the professional body, at this page, the PRRB. Just as a side note, by default, if you actually read the bylaws of the various metros and the various municipalities, it states in there that you must do the installation according to the national standards and the SANS requirements. Within those SANS requirements, it calls for a PRRB COC. So by default, they should be calling for the CO, and they should be recognizing the PRRB.
Okay, all right. This is one, which will be a new one for me. Why does the PRRB not accept SAQA certificate evaluations? And there's, I have an original SAQA certificate where the SAQA authority has recognized all my master engineer certificates in 2010 when he applied for an exceptional skill for the Green ID. Lee, quick one there, and then I'm going to give you a break and hammer Steve a bit.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Rory. So let's let's put that in a practical environment. So we've got foreigners that come over from Germany or the UK or whatever it is. They come to South Africa and they want to now equate their qualification to a South African qualification. Because they are a plumber in the UK or Germany or an engineer, they come to South Africa and say, well, I was an engineer there, I should be an engineer in South Africa. Well, I don't know, because we've got different standards, different ways in which we do things. So what they do is they go to SAQA and they say, hey, this is my qualification, here it is, I'm a qualified plumber in the UK, right? And then they say to SAQA, yes, here it is, and SAQA does a match, and it goes and looks at the qualifications in South Africa, and it says, hey, this plumbing qualification is the one that aligns to your qualification from Germany, right? However, what people miss is they think that they just go to SAQA and they say, oh, because I've got this verification now, I'm automatically a plumber. It didn't say that. If you read, there's a little clause that says in it that you need to go and verify. So you've got this, so when you go to a training provider and you say to the training provider, hey, I've got this qualification from Germany, and here's the South African one. Please, can you RPL me, give me recognition of prior learning to this qualification so that I can get the South African equivalent. So again, just by going to SAQA and saying, hey, can you match what certificate is matched to a South African one, or my German certificate to a South African one, they're only going to match the two. You still have to go and show your competency through a recognition of prior learning process. In the same way, you know what, Rory, it's very quick. Trust me, if I'm a plumber in South Africa, and I'm sure a lot of guys have tried it, I go to Australia, or I'll go to the UK, or I'll go to Germany. I can tell you now, they will not recognize my qualification. They will say, yes, you're a plumber, but please go and do extra training, understand our standards, the way we do our operations, and only after how many years will they give you an equivalent qualification.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks. Actually, I have one more. I've already done my trade test, and this alludes to the earlier question, the second part of that. Why must I do another test with the PIRB?
Okay, so when you became a qualified plumber, you did a trade test, a hand skills test, right? And you went in and you did predominantly a hand skills test. It was a hand skills test. With the PIRB, it's not a hand skills test. It's a written test where we're trying to understand that you understand the standards. Then we clearly ask you the question and say, well, you know how to put the pipes together, but the failure in the industry is actually understanding, you know, the methodology in which these pipes are. Why do you put a geyser train? Why do you pipe out with a metallic pipe? Why do you put a vacuum breaker on, etc., etc.? So the test is not to determine, you know, what people think that we're coming to take their qualification. You've got your qualification. We are just testing you because if you're issuing it, and I think, remember I spoke a little bit earlier on about from a PIRB's perspective, we're going to look at the sector as a whole, not just as an individual. So if we let anybody sign off the certificate, what's going to happen to our certificate? It's just going to become devalued. So if we want people to sign off the PIRB certificate, we want to make sure that they are competent and they know that they are signing off that certificate. So if there's any recourse that comes back to us, we can prove to them that there it is, there's the evidence that we have on hand, that we test the individuals, that they are competent in doing that specific thing. But I think, Rory, what's important, and I'm just going to add to this, is that we are not taking a person's qualification away from him. We're not doing that. As a registered, as a professional body, we need to protect the rest of the plumbers in there. So you might be qualified, but we are protecting the pool of competent people within the sector as well.
Thanks, Lee. Thank you. This is also a quick question. What is a charge, an acceptable charge to a customer for issuing a COC? For work that was not done by me. Okay. So it's inspection.
That's a very dangerous one. I saw that comment. You shouldn't be issuing a certificate for any other work. And let me just add on to that one. If people issue certificates of compliance on other people's work, and that work is found to be incorrect, that person who signed it off will be held accountable for that work. End of story.
Yeah.
But I think, Rory, just touch base in terms of where we are there. We have had a webinar and discussed that. And from IOPS's side, we actually put a checklist together to assist the plumbers in terms of those properties where the guys were maybe called out to do work. So we put a standardized document together to assist the plumbers in terms of what to check and everything else. And I think the key thing is what you were saying just earlier, is that, you know, in terms of that test that's there, we all know that in terms of the sector of trading currently now, there's very little in terms of standards. And the biggest problem that we're finding, and myself on a daily basis, is where plumbers are putting themselves at risk. And I think we need to just put that you're putting yourself at risk, that if you're going to a job and you don't understand the standard, how can you report on the standard? And I think this is the key factor that we have. For so many guys that we've gone to for a site inspection to assist the guys where they say, well, I didn't know. And ignorance is not a defense, in terms of the law. So the guys need to be able to ensure that when they're signing that COC, that accountability and that liability is taken away from them, that they can make the consumer aware, as it says in the standard, that you need to make the consumer aware of any non-compliance and in writing. And if you don't understand the standard, how are you going to report on that standard in writing as what the law requires? So again, it's just about upping our game, and also as a protection measure there to make sure that you don't get caught on the wrong end of the stick from a manufacturer, a developer, or a consumer telling you to do something wrong and putting yourself at risk. And I have 4 of those this week, Rory, where guys are in trouble because of that specific point, not understanding the standards and the requirements.
Okay, so a point. Thank you, Steve, for coming in on that one. Thanks, Lee, for that. Wiseman, I think you've got your answer there. It's a dangerous practice. So tread carefully on it. As regards charging.
Rory, can I just quickly, he did ask a question as well, how much must I charge? Let's assume he did the work. Well, how much must he charge? Well, the reality is PRRB does not dictate price. It will never dictate price. So you charge whatever you feel comfortable with, whatever the market will accept.
Durban price. Durban price as much as you can get.
Thanks, guys. On the issue of charging, as Lee says, nobody can dictate a fee. That will fall foul of the Competitions Act, and I think yes, charge what you value your work at, but even to give from so-and-so to such and such, or so much to so much, would be falling foul of the Competitions Commission, and we have to be mindful of that. Steve, with IOPSA and the relationship with PIRB, can you just briefly, please, Steve, give us a summary of the relationship between the 2 organizations?
Yes, Rory. Well, I think Lee touched on it earlier. I was the current president at the time where we looked at this registration. And I think we need to just get an understanding of where it comes from. It actually came from Eskom. It came from when we were in the load shedding era. IOPSA was approached and asked the question of how many registered plumbers are there, or how many qualified plumbers are there in South Africa? And to be quite honest, we couldn't tell them, because by that time, everything had just basically fallen apart in terms of the local registration. There was no documentation of what was there. And the reason behind the request was to basically address the energy problem that we had in South Africa. And it was to upskill and train plumbers in terms of solar. So that started the ball rolling in terms of that registration. And so therefore, from IOPSA's part, we took it upon ourselves as a project to get the PIRB up and running. And please explain the difference between the 2. But basically, our relationship is we have plumbers and members of IOPSA that sit on the board of the PIRB. We assist in terms of facilitating in terms of the training, and that's based on information coming through from the PIRB in terms of, as I said earlier, identification of problems in the sector or the plumbing sector, and again going back to developing that training. Also delivering the webinars. Some of the guys in IOPSA deliver the webinars. And so that we have a very close relationship. I sometimes look at ourselves as Siamese twins. We share a lot in common. So, we have a common spine. We have a common goal in terms of uplifting the standards industry. And from the PIRB's point of view, looking at that individual to ensure that he's upskilled. And from IOPSA's point of view, it's to ensure that we have the facility and the food to feed that individual to ensure that he actually meets the requirements and lifts his game up in terms of the standards and understanding it. So there's a lot of synergy between the PIRB and IOPSA, but certainly 2 totally separate entities altogether.
Okay, Steve, could we summarize it as your independent bodies, but you're independent in each other? Okay?
Yes, certainly.
All right. Roger's getting cross with me because he says we must be talking about plumbing questions first. Roger, I must just clarify the questions that are coming in are very much PIRB related. So, you know, please bear with us. But Steve, I'm back to you again. I would like to know what legal requirements are pertaining the electrical connection to the geyser whilst replacing it. Are we as plumbers permitted to do disconnection and reconnection thereof?
And the answer to that question is no. We approached the Electrical Contractors Association. We actually have it in writing from them. It has been circulated, and we are utilizing that in the sectors that it requires attention. So the answer to that question quite simply is no.
So can I just quickly come in that one, Steve? The answer is that you can do what the hell you want, but you have to get a certificate of compliance from a registered electrician after the installation has taken place.
Okay, thanks, guys. Will Durban municipality, and I see eThekwini came up again as giving an answer, but will Durban municipality accept a PIRB COC?
No.
Well,
sorry,
yes,
Lee.
yes and no. Because by default, and the reason why I say yes and no is because by default, their standards, their bylaws refer to the standards. And Robert is asking which specific standard. So SANS 10.10.6, SANS 13.52, and I can't let the cat out of the bag, a big standard is being changed where it makes reference to the fact that you have to issue a certificate of compliance. So, yes, if the municipality is calling that the installation must comply to those standards, and the standard says you must issue a certificate, then you've got to comply and issue a certificate.
Okay. All right, yes, I see. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
Rory,
Steve?
also, if you go look at eThekwini's bylaws state that for every geyser replacement, you must issue a COC. All right, you have 7 water inspectors in Durban. There must be a couple of hundred geysers every day being replaced and everything else. What we also failed to recognize for new work, yes, they will require their certificate of compliance, but we're also looking at alterations, amendments, changes, etc., where the law specifically requires you to issue that PIRB COC, as Lee said, in terms of 1352. All of those things are there. So it's, again, from IOPSA PIRB, we've had many discussions with eThekwini on this, and it's not that we don't have a good relationship, because tomorrow I'm actually meeting Rajesh at 9 o'clock on a site that has a problem in Durban. So we do work closely together, but in terms of the hierarchy, it sometimes becomes a little bit complicated, but it's not something that I believe is going to carry on for an extended period of time. It's been a long battle.
Right. So there is yeah, Lee.
I just wanted to make, you must remember, Rory, again, when I started off, we have 200 different metros, sorry, 270 different metros and municipalities throughout the country. And of those 270, there are only 2 metros that have a register. Only 2, nothing else. So the rest of the country is it. So yes, from a PIRB's perspective and an IOPSA's perspective, we engage with the municipalities. We continuously, I was down in Cape Town again last week, engaging with the different municipalities and the different higher authorities or districts to try and engage with those individuals. I mean, we were talking today about SALGA, engaging with SALGA, which is it. So we are on a continuous engagement with those, but it's trying to, as Steve, is trying to work your way through to meet the right people. And when eventually you meet the right people and you start things going, then that person is replaced, and then you start the process. But I can assure you, from an industry's perspective, we are working on it. We are slowly winning the battle, right? But it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, we are now, I've just got to get my maths right, nearly 10, 12 years down the line, right? We're only starting to get it into the standards now. right? But now we're going to pick up. I think we're going to pick up a lot more momentum. Okay.
Yeah. Paddle, thanks for that. Tabani, I think the question's been answered there. But I'm saying generally to everybody on the webinar, you know, I think let's recognize that there's a nice role for you guys to play. It's scary when you hear that 2 municipalities are actually doing it, it's Cape Town and Durban. And yeah, we have this mass of municipalities out there. So if you go to your local authority and start pushing the use of PIRB in the absence of anything else, this will help the process along. So in other words, you can be part of the positiveness. So I leave that for everybody to think about. Robert, I know you asked a question. I can't see it now, but I do remember it. Where does it state in the standards that you must have a PIRB certificate? I think I'm correct in stating that it doesn't say a PIRB COC, it says from a professional body.
Look at 1352, 10.10.6. The terminology in the two documents is slightly different. One says PIRB COC and the other refers back to the professional body.
Correct, 100%. But that's just an older one, an older version that when we do a rewrite, so you're 100% correct, Steve, Rory. It states that it's from the professional body, and the reason why we make it to make the statement from the professional body is because the PIRB could lose its status as a professional body in 10 years, 20 years time. We might not meet the criteria set by SACWA. We might be doing things that are detrimental to the industry, and we are excluding everybody out of the process. They will just remove our license, right, and give it to another body that is a professional body in the sector. And that's why it doesn't state the PIRB per se. Okay, Steve did say the old one does, but that will change.
Those are all changing. Yeah. I know with my involvement with SABS at the moment, it will refer always to a professional body, and Lee's answered that question. Steve, what's the difference between a National Certificate in Construction Plumbing NQF Level 3 and a trade test?
All right, if we go back to I think it's 1999, 2000, Rory, for those guys that have been around as grey-haired as me, we started off with the building industry, or BIFSA, and then we went off to the BITB, which is the Building Industry Training Board. That basically ran us up to around about 1990, 2000. And then during that time, all plumbers that entered into that was under an apprenticeship system, and they would serve their recognized apprenticeship. It went from 5 years down to 4, then down to 3. You would then be required at the end of that time, bearing in mind going to the various technicons, because again you were doing the blocks, and you would then go and do a trade test. I think in 2000, 2001 it changed. We went to CETA, which is the Construction Education and Training Authority, and basically all of that imploded, and basically what we had was a learnership. Okay, so the two went from an apprenticeship to a learnership, and that learnership had no trade test at the end of it. You had 49 modules in which to do. Once you had completed those modules in that time frame, you were then deemed to be competent, and you got the level 3 qualification, construction, plumber, whatever. It is a bit of an issue. It is sometimes in Durban, especially some of the guys, when you go in there, they say that because the individuals haven't conducted or passed a trade test, that you're not deemed to be a plumber. The issue with that is, yes, you are, in my mind, and I've spoken to our training guy, is that was what the requirement of law was at the time. So if you go back and talk to that document that Lee was addressing earlier, the individual that comes in from overseas, it basically maintains of what that level of training was at the time. So in terms of that learnership, that's the difference. One had a trade test at the end of it, the other didn't. It was based on modules.
Okay, thanks, Steve. I see one question coming up here about why do Quickart, who's a major manufacturer, make TP valves that are half plastic? I'm going to refer that to Quickart, because is anybody from Quickart out there can answer that question?
Rory, when you look at plastic, it's actually not plastic. If you go and have a look at the the material and the component. It's not. So I think for the individual that's there, it's certainly not plastic. But yeah, that's a question that if you want to send through the QuickArt, and they'll be quite up to speed in terms of providing that response. It's not actually plastic.
Aaron, I promise you'll have a response to that. Why are plumbers not involved? I think this is quite important. Why are plumbers not involved with the final sign-off plan? Only engineers and architects sign off before construction begins. But as a plumber, we need to install as per their spec, which does not always fit their plans. As far as I know, in England and America, plan will not be signed off if not including a plumber. Guys?
So the simple answer is...
Steve, you want to have go first, then Lee?
All right, I think, Rory, I think this is one of the areas where the plumbers seem to fall down in terms of asking the perfect question of the professional team. You know, all too often I get at the end of it, and Lee will touch base on it, where a plumber issues a certificate of compliance on something that he didn't design. You know, if you go back to EXA, it's basically the professional who designed that installation that needs to sign it off, not the plumber. And it won't be the first or last time that a plumber submitted a certificate of compliance for a work that's been done, carried out in terms of the instructions given, working drawings done, and when the auditor goes to site, it fails. And therefore, the plumber takes the brunt of it. So, again, very clear, if the engineer designs it, he signs it.
Steve, I wanted to add in that specific thing is, well, firstly, our laws don't allow for it. Our laws is simply the engineer and the architects or the professional team are the ones that take that, to, you know, do the design and give it to the plumber and says, well, execute it. However, what happens is that the regulation says that you may not go against the safety requirements within the standard. So a lot of people go and now write that all out and say, well, I'm an engineer, I'm the clever person. But what all those diligent plumbers should go back to the engineers and whatever and says, okay, if you want me to install it like that, I'm more than happy to install it, but sign an indemnity form or put it in writing to me that you have instructed me to do that specific thing. All too often is that we know that it's wrong, right? But we don't go back to the professional team and say it's wrong, or to the client. They just use it. So it's important to sign to make sure that you have the evidence. That if you ever and forget about the PRRB, if anything hits the fan, the proverbial hits the fan, you can bring up a piece of paper and say, guys, there it is. I was instructed, I was given the verbal instruction, or I was given the written instruction, or I was told to do it this way, and I've got it in writing.
Okay, thanks, Lee. I just want to say to Candy, Gamed, and Werner, I'm not going to pick up questions right now, but they will be answered in writing. I'm watching the time here, and anybody else who's put in a question and we haven't addressed it, you will receive an answer, so rest assured. But I want to go to the next one. How are manufacturers monitored via OPSA/PIRB? Aaron, that's a very broad question, but let's see what the response is.
Okay, so let's just track back. Let's just unpack that question a little bit, and I'm going to be very quick on that unpacking, understanding the time. What the regulation state, it says that if a product must be installed, it must meet the SANS requirements. In other words, there's a document that you go and get from SANS that says that the electrical geyser that you installed must be must be manufactured to those requirements. So there is a SANS standard. Right. So now how do the manufacturers get checked in line? Is that, well, from the PRRB's perspective, and it might sound terrible, who actually makes the decision at the end of the day to purchase that product to install it? Now, there's only two people, and you could add three people if you want to put it. One is the plumber. In other words, I've chosen that geyser to install that. I've chosen that geyser to put into this installation. I know that the geyser doesn't meet the requirements. Right? So who's going to be held accountable? The plumber. Right? And if the plumber is ignorant of the fact, the plumber will still be held accountable because he should have asked the question from the manufacturer or from the merchant. The other time when it comes about is generally the professional team or the consumer says, I've just bought this wonderful tap down the road and I want you to install it. So as I said to you previously, you say, man, you know, this tap doesn't comply, right? Yes, you don't want to walk away from the work. What you do is you indemnify yourself against it, and you write there and you let the client know in writing and saying, you've given me this tap, I'm more than happy to install it, but you need to indemnify me against the fact that I've told you that this is a non-compliant tap.
Thanks, Lee.
Get the fact that it shouldn't have been installed, but
in any event, yeah. I think the monitoring, I think it falls to, as Lee has alluded, it doesn't fall to IOPSA or the PIRB. It falls to the standards, which are mandatory or compulsory standards. So every manufacturer needs to comply with those standards, which are written into the various compulsory laws or standards.
Rory, if I can just step in there, I think now more than ever, it's up for the plumber to ask the question if they're unsure, because we know that we have the issues with SABS and some of the issues in terms of testing. So I think, you know, if you're unsure, it's really do ask the question, because I think that it's a bit of a bun fight and free-for-all at the moment. And we have a huge amount of imports coming through, you know, they all look like the same thing. So just be a little bit more diligent in terms of your purchasing and what you're installing, and just protect yourself, as Lee said.
Absolutely, Steve, yes, absolutely. And use the mandatory standards as your guide. Cost-wise, depending on the type of work carried out, when do I issue a certificate? Example, do I issue a certificate when I have replaced a toilet or fitted a new tap?
Yeah, it's a good question. And if you actually, whatever COC, if you got the COC, actually, you know what? It's amazing. If you turn over the COC, there's a lot of writing on the back, and it clearly defines everything around the COC. So just to hone in it, yes, there is an amount, because I mean, if you go and change a tap washer, I mean, we don't expect you to issue a COC on changing a tap washer. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's not going to work that way. So there is a value. That value is at this particular point, I think it's 1,500, 1,000. I think it's 1,500 rand, right? As a complete. However, anything that has got a safety issue around the gears or whatever it is, a COC has got to be issued irrespective of what the value is.
Okay. Thanks, Lee, for that, because I think, guys, yes, read the other side. As always, in anything, read the terms and conditions behind what the big print giveth, the small print taketh away. Hendrik, we'll send you that slide that you're looking for, because it seems that the pictures are causing problems here. Oh, you've got it on. Well done. Thank you, Lee. Thank you. There it is, Hendrik. Robert.
So the slide that is on there, so Rory, can I quickly just talk to that slide that you see there? That is the designation structure of the PIRB. It clearly shows you the structure as you go up. You know, so for instance, we make space for people that have got competencies right down at the bottom, all the way up to a director plumber and a master plumber. There was a question earlier on, I think it was from Brett, who did ask, and I think it was a very good question. Brett, you've given some good questions in. We got your email. We might not get through all of them, but you actually asked some very pertinent questions. And one of the questions he asked, and it's been raised a few times, is saying, well, what protects us from one, you know, the PIRB going and taking, for instance, the licensed plumber, and we got the licensed plumber to issue the COC, and then the next year we're going to now push it up to the master plumber, and that only then can issue the COC. I can only tell you that is not going to happen, because we will get our license removed from the professional body, because they will revoke our license, because it's an exclusive process from that perspective. We're just making it difficult for people to get into the sector. It's not the case. The simple thing is, to be a licensed plumber or to be registered, you need to prove your competency that you are a qualified plumber. It could be a red seal, it could be a learnership, it could be a Section 28, it could be whatever it is within the South African context. It's as simple as that. However, if you wish to issue a license, or not a license, we need to, as a professional body, just because you've got your qualification, doesn't mean you're competent. Let me give you an example, guys, ladies and gentlemen. This year, we've just introduced it was last year, October, we introduced we never had it before, but when you join the professional body, you now go and do a written test. It's an online test. Some people are asking, how do I do it? When you register, you will automatically get that information. It's an online, now listen to this, online open book test, and it only refers to the standards. And we're not asking you to do mathematical questions. We're asking very basic questions that a qualified plumber, a competent person, should know in the sector. Right. The average failure rate to date, the number of people that are failing that test, not because it's difficult, and I repeat myself, it's an open book test. It's not a closed book. You can have the book in front of you. The average failure rate, I think it is sitting at, well, the pass rate is 26%. Only 26% of people are passing that test, right? Multiple choice, open book test, right? And of that failure rate, so it's 26, so 74% of the people that have failed, they're failing at an average of 22%. So they don't even know 80% of the work. Not even 50% of the work. So when people says to me they know everything, they know the standard, well, if everybody knows the standard and they're competent, then there shouldn't be a problem in writing the test. It's easy. It's a 40-minute test. Online, quickly, answer the questions. There you go. You can feel proud about yourself to show that I've proved to you that I know what I'm talking about. So
Thanks, Nick.
I was there already.
I noticed that, but I mean the points are very valid. There's one here that caught my eye. A water crisis in Cape Town, and a lot of property owners are looking at filtering non-potable water. Is PIRB also looking at a regulation on how such an installation should be carried out?
Very good question, Rory.
Yep. Rory, it is something that's being developed, and also with IOPSA, we've been engaging with the South African Institute of Architects and also the Road to Motors Association in terms of rainwater harvesting and greywater harvesting. I think it's been an issue for quite a while, but it does have its issues. I think that one of the key things and functions that we don't take into consideration is that our drainage in some areas is not designed for that lesser flow in terms of removing that wastewater. We also have, we had Shane Lecombe out from Australia, where in terms of their issues with rainwater, they also went for tanks. We just remember that going back quite a few years ago, every house had a rainwater tank. It was done away with because of disease and everything else. So there is work that needs to be done on it, and IOPSA and various parties are working together in terms of developing that standard. Our only problem at the moment, excuse me, is we've got a lot of people going out there that think they're designing things correctly, and in essence, they could be poisoning half of their little community or whatever with the way that things are being installed and some that we've done. So it is something that is being worked on.
Okay. Thanks, Steve.
So we're working very closely with the City of Cape Town, assisting it from that perspective. But I just want to add a little bit to what Steve said. He said, and I said it was a very good question, is because the problem is that we don't have any regulations that are surrounding grey water and reusable potable water. So the issue is that when you do an installation, what do you do the installation to? What standards do you do it? So and Steve touched on it. IOPSA and PIRB, well, IOPSA more so, is working on best practice for the sector. It's trying to say, well, guys, in absence of the standards, which are going to take X number of years to catch up, we're trying to put best practice together, and we're working very closely with the city to put best practice together.
Thanks, Lee. Can I just come in there, because I work closely with the Water Research Commission, and for the first time ever, and you guys can access this through the Water Research website, they have issued now a research and scientific document on greywater and rainwater harvesting. And it's a very good document. We are publishing sections of it in Plumbing Africa, but it's easily accessible, and I think this will help everybody to speed this up quite considerably. Lee, how much has PIRB spent, or what proportion of the marketing budget is spent promoting PIRB to the greater public?
Okay, so Rory, I think it's a question, so let's just start off. Has the PIRB got any money? Because, there's a perception that the PIRB is swimming in profits and whatever it is. We had a gentleman who came in and said that it's amazing, what are you doing with all the profits? And I'm going, well, I don't know which balance sheet you were reading, because the balance sheet that I have and the balance sheet that the board has doesn't reflect that in any way. Remember, we're a non-profit organization. We cannot make any profits. We barely I'll be straightforward. And there was a question from, I think, Bruce. He says, are they freely available? Yes, they can come and view them at the office. Anytime they're there, you can come and look at the financials. It is there. It is clear, right? We're actually running at a deficit. A deficit means we're running at a loss, which is a good thing for a non-profit organization. It's not a massive loss, but we're just barely breaking even. So let's go back to the question is, well, first, do we have money to spend on marketing? Right. Yes, we do have money spending on marketing. But the question is, where would that spend, and which is not big spend, where would that spend be best spent to get the biggest impact in the sector? Right. So that biggest impact would be, generally first, the building control officers, the BCOs around the country. So that's where majority of the spend is being spent at this particular point in time, and I'll be frank, is because we're trying to engage continuously with the building control officers, because if you win that specific battle, that's where the biggest impact will take place. The second one on the tier is with manufacturers and commercial environments, i.e., and there's some questions coming with the insurance sector. We deal on a continuous basis with the insurance sector, not necessarily us, but more so the PIRB, sorry, not the PIRB, IOPSA. They have an insurance forum, which anybody who is a member or anybody in the sector can engage any insurances that are sitting on that forum through the Institute of Plumbing. It's there. It's available from that perspective. So we try and hit commercial sectors, right? Again, insurances, big property agencies, and all that stuff. The last one, and it's sad to say that, and the reason why is, yes, we would love to hit the consumer and try and engage with the consumer. But Rory, in the plumbing, in the advertising environment, that is a very difficult and a very expensive exercise to do. I mean, just to take out an advert, a full-page advert in the Sunday Times will cost in excess of 100,000 Rand. So we don't have that type of capital, which we can spend on trying to get to Mr. and Mrs. Jones. We're going from the building control officer to the commercial sectors, and then down to the consumer. I would love to do it the other way around, but we don't have the money for that.
Again, I think as an industry, each of us individually as proud plumbers, it is beholden on us to talk about why we are proud plumbers, and that I am a PIRB plumber, and that to the consumer, that will help start getting it. Because remember, for every good experience that a consumer has, they will talk to 5 to 10 people about it. So if each of us could do that, it would be a start, and that's fair. Guys, I see people are starting to leave. Meneer van der Merwe, I'm not going to insult your language by trying to speak in Afrikaans, but I can understand it, and I think that could be answered. I think the question is that if a plumber is expected to do the drainage, but it's being covered up, is he permitted to exclude drainage from the COC because he cannot see it?
Yeah, Well, yes, he would. You'll just put a notice in. You'll exclude it from that perspective. I mean, you can't. So, for instance, I'm looking at the question again, but I most probably take 5 minutes to try and unpack it. But just if I understand it correctly, let's just use if the client wants a certificate for the sale of a property, for argument's sake, are you able to see the pipes in the wall? I'm not able to do that. I must exclude it. There's a couple of questions about, and guys, if anything, learn about the non-compliance notification, because that's going to be a big thing in the next couple of months, is the non-compliance notice. In other words, give the client a non-compliance. Say to them, look, I can't see this specific thing underneath. Or, yeah, you know what, this drain might be wrong, but the client hasn't got money to fix the thing, right? If you're doing a geyser replacement or whatever it is and find something wrong, you have to issue them with a non-compliance note. Put everything in writing. Protect yourself. So going back to that gentleman's question, if I understand it correctly, if it's covered up, then put it in writing and saying, I didn't inspect that thing because it was covered up, or whatever the situation is.
But I think also, Lee, in terms of that, I mean, we all know in terms of the drainage, but, the ideal things to go and have a look at is in terms of how it's connected, where it is there manholes, is there rotting eyes, how the gullies. So all of those items that you can see, you can note on. And then in terms of what I've done and been to sites and what have you, is if there's manholes open, whatever. And then open-ended questions to the consumer. Have you had numerous blockages? Have you had that? And then it's just in the note, as you said, on the COC, that it's a visual inspection of the work done. You've tested and done as much as you can. All the venting above ground's done. Tick the box and just cover yourself. So 100% in terms of what you're saying, Liddy.
So one of our biggest failures in the sector as plumbers, we don't put things in writing.
Yeah.
You give a quote that just says one line, do plumbing. Oh my goodness gracious me.
Okay, thanks guys.
So next, Steve.
Very valid point. Put things in writing. Avoid verbal orders or instructions. Put it in writing. Lee, you're right next door to Cullinan's. Can you visit the Samuel who called us lousy models? Can you visit the Cullinan?
Give us his address. We'll go see him. We're on our way.
You're on your way. Okay, so that's your third municipality, guys, that's going to be doing it. Thanks for that, Samuel. Lawrence, Durban Municipality do work in Durban. Can a PIRB member not registered with Durban Municipality do work? Yes or no, Steve?
Okay, let's go back to eThekwini. Okay, and again, if for those guys that haven't, so let's just go back to where the PIRB have a test. All right, the PIRB have an entrance exam in terms of the standards. My biggest issue, and I've debated this point with eThekwini, is they also have a test. That test is based more on their standards. That test is based on high-rise buildings, pump systems, storage capacity of fire, domestic water. Very few of the questions that are actually on the test pertain to general plumbing. Where we've had this dispute is that most of the plumbers that go and actually do the test actually fail, and then you've got to go back, I think it's 6 months later or so many weeks later. So they do have a test, and their perception is that the plumbers that are registered with the PIRB that go there don't know too much because they don't pass the test. But the test, again, is based on a large majority of work that most plumbers do not do in terms of high-rise buildings and pumps and everything else. So it is rather difficult in terms of understanding it. Some of the new guys do battle with it. But yes, if you're registered with the PIRB, you're more than welcome to go down there. They do it on a Wednesday, and only Wednesdays you go, you register, you pay, they give you a document, you go back, you learn it, you go back and do the test, and then hopefully you pass it.
Yeah. Rory, can I just come in this from Samuel? And I think it's quite, I'm going to read exactly what Samuel said. I was told by the building inspector of Cullinan, Pretoria, that they are going to go away, they're going to be doing away with their certificates soon and only accept PIRB certificates. But he cannot give me an indication as to when it will come into play. See now, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, this is a prime example of how we're slowly breaking those barriers down. It's because we're dealing with, in life we deal with people, and we're winning the battle. We're winning it slowly, but surely we are winning the battle. Thank you very much for that, Samuel. It gives us, great heart that we're winning. We deal with the Tshwane Council. As I said to you, we are training the building control officers up to make them more understand what the PRRB is about, what the Institute is about, how we can help them in doing this. And we slowly win it back because they can see the value that the PRRB is bringing for everybody in the sector, not just an individual, but everybody in the sector. We're not perfect. Don't get us wrong, guys. Nothing's perfect. We're not. But don't fight us. Come and give positive criticism, give solutions. We're not going to fight against it. We might come across, when you're abrupt and you attack us, we might come take a step back out of the situation. But we're there. Talk positively. Say, hey guys, we don't think CPD should be done in this specific. Then we sit down and we debated it holistically from that perspective. But if we got one person shouting out of 5,500 registered individuals, who should we be listening to? The 5,499 or the one person?
Thanks, Liam. Okay, now we know why Roger's left. Amos, we're going to actually, you would have heard the first part of that discussion on visas, so I think we'll reply to that in writing for you. Steve, I'm in the process of training 20 ladies who are interested in doing a complete plumbing course. This is in the Northwest at the TUT College, and I require some guidance in this regard. I think that's a tremendous thing, Aubrey. Steve will be in touch with you in writing.
Rory, sorry, in past tense. I discussed it with Aubrey today. Aubrey and I had a chat, and we're going to be meeting next week in terms of providing guidance, in terms of the requirements of the students, and assisting Aubrey in terms of putting documentation together, assisting. I've touched base with Nick. He's in Cape Town now, and we'll be sitting up with Aubrey. And I think it's great that what Aubrey's involved with up there in Ga-Rankuwa, I think it is. Am I correct, Aubrey? But yeah, we've already had that discussion today. Sorry, Rory.
Excellent, thanks, Steve, and that Aubrey, well done. And there is another opportunity for us to push IOPSA and PIRB and plumbing. Okay, do I need to be qualified as an electrician to install a solar controller? I'm asking as I'm a solar and heat pump installer. Steve?
That's, yeah. Stumps me a little bit, but I don't think a solar controller, because a solar controller is not necessarily connected directly to the electrical system.
It's on a photovoltaic panel or whatever.
Yeah. So it's a complete.
I'm going to correct you with that one. So please, I'll follow up with that specific one.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I think the Bargaining Council will come back to you in writing. Robert. How can one work with CPD points if I register for a webinar, but my team of 4 PRB registered plumbers watch it together? Do they all need to pay the webinar fee?
Okay, so can I answer that one specifically?
Yes.
So I mentioned before that we're always making reference to these webinars, right? These webinars are an external service provider that is providing the platform, and they provide the content and they do everything. So therefore, they've got rules and regulations which you have to buy. So let's bring that into a contextualization. Let's put it in a context, another context. QuickArt has their benchmark course, right? Now, if one person goes to that benchmark course and pays only one person, can the other 4 people also be able to attend? I think not. So it's no different in the webinar environment. In the same token as that, as we know, another way to get your CPD points is to, if you look at the Plumbing Africa magazine, after you've read the Plumbing Africa magazine, at the back of the Plumbing Africa magazine, there is questions, right? Now, if everybody read the magazine, but only one person answered the question, that only one person is going to get the CPD points or the points allocation. It's not all four of them. But I think the important thing is to understand is that, you know, the webinars is an outsourced process. It's got nothing to do with IOPSA, nothing to do with PRRB. It's an outsourced service provider that is providing a service. They do webinars for a whole lot of professional bodies, different professional bodies. So that's it. You don't have to do webinars. You can do anywhere you want to go. Sorry.
No, I think it's fairly answered. Just some recognition for you guys from Trio, Spida. You guys are doing a sterling job as a collective. It makes me, as a plumber, confident to carry out my work. Thank you, Theo, and I hope everybody else feels that way. Geez, Robert, Hendrik, Lee will get in touch with you and chat to you. Harvesting rainwater is not legal. I think we've actually addressed that. It's not legal in terms of the potential for developing diseases and that, but it is being worked on at the moment. IOPSA is very involved with that, as is the Water Research Commission. Did you mention the letter of non-compliance from the customer just to know about the issuing of CSE, where the architect and client still insisting the plumber for the CSE, even if the design is done by a plumbing consulting company? Can we refuse? And what is the way forward to protect us as plumbers?
So,
I think
so
we're already
quickly
touched
answer
on
that
that
one.
earlier.
Just quickly, yes, you can refuse. The reality is you can refuse the process. But you know what? In actual life, when you refuse to do something, right, you know that they're just going to run off and do somewhere else.
Yeah.
So it's your, you say to the guy, you say to the consulting firm, I'm more than happy to do it, but here's my letter stating to you that this installation does not comply to the standard, because you're the professional team, not me, right? You take the responsibility at the end of the day. Here's my letter.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Lee, maybe just going out of this is maybe we should, to try and assist, and it's maybe just to get some hands up. I know we have the non-compliant, but maybe we should, between IOPSA, just develop a standard letter that we could put together that the individuals and the plumbers could possibly utilize. So, Rory, if we could just make a note of that and maybe tie that up with the non-compliance, just as a letter, and we'll make reference to the standards in that. So, yeah, I think it's something that we could work on and do.
Okay.
Rory, I'm also just reading the comments here as well, and there was one that just came up, which I just want to highlight quickly. If I may just jump into your parade. I'm sorry, Rory, because I think it's quite an important one. And it goes back to the question with regards to, how much money do we spend on the public versus, of our budget gets. And I'll answer that one clear, but I said building control officer, commercial environment. The commercial sector. So there's one comment that's coming from Theo Senda. I do apologize if I made the hash of your. But he indicates there that one of the geyser manufacturers have now indicated that they shall not carry the warranty if it's not carried out by a licensed plumber. So there's a typical example of how we're breaking those barriers down in the commercial sector.
100%.
Thanks, Lee. I was going to ask that question, but you're obviously reading the questions faster than I can. Well done. Samuel, I just want to pick up on yours. The inspectors also need to do some sort of training. We're back to webinars. Lee, could you want to take that through quickly, please? How are you helping with the building inspectors?
Well, not with the webinars, but as I said, the PRRB has allocated funding to train the building control officers up, because if we got knowledgeable building control officers, it makes the plumber's life easier. It elevates them up from that perspective. So there's a lot of emphasis going in that specific thing. But as I said to you, 270 municipalities around the country. Of that, take an average of 5 building control officers to each municipality. It's quite a big task. But definitely, we're definitely working on it.
Right. And I see Tabani has picked up that whole thing on rainwater harvesting. Thank you, Tabani. You're basically saying it's not for human consumption, it's to save water and use in gardens and other such places. It doesn't alter the fact, of course, that we still need best practice in terms of installation and that. But thank you for that, Tabani. Ladies and gentlemen,
sorry, Rory,
yeah.
just to jump in there. I think what we have seen, I mean, you go down to numerous sort of merchants that are selling kits in terms of tanks and pumps and everything else, and even advising people just connect it up to your existing water lines and everything else. So in terms of that consumption, yes, we understand that, but we're talking about a consumer that's desperate for water or looking for it. And if we go and look at the communications we have in Australia, where they have 3 lines, designated hot, they have their potable and non-potable, all coming from those tanks. And it's actually a very nice design system that they have, which, again, we've adapted a lot of stuff from Australia, and it's one of those part and parcels that we have there, so that you take away the stagnant water. It's always topped up by the municipal, etc. So some nice designs that come out of there. And obviously signage. Signage is one of the things that I see when I go to these jobs, and there's just no signage whatsoever, so you wouldn't know what you're drinking or what it is. So, yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to go into that.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve. One last question I'm going to take from Christopher, just come in. I think it's very valid. Reason for a hot vacuum breaker to be 200 millimeters from the hot outlet, as I can't get an authentic answer from most plumbers. What is the reason?
Okay,
Rory, when you were, yeah, sorry, Lee, you carry on.
Lee, go.
So let's just speak, Christopher. It's some last bit of information, guys, from a technical point of view, so we can leave the webinar. Because I think there's a few people leaving already. We're already half an hour over the session. We will respond to the most of the questions coming through. So the last one there, 200 millimeters. So I hope this is an authentic answer to you, Christopher. The standard doesn't require that you need to have the vacuum breaker 200 millimeters away from the hot water outlet. Now the reason why, it's a manufacturer's requirement, because that's a good plumbing practice that happens, is because heat rises, and if you got it directly over the hot water outlet, what happens is it's going to concentrate all the heat up that pipe to that vacuum breaker, and it's actually going to cause damage to the vacuum breaker. But by offsetting it 200 millimeters away from the outlet, the heat trap, it creates a heat trap at the elbow and doesn't transfer the heat down to the vacuum breaker. So I hope that's an authentic answer. But that's the reason why.
The other one, which is a more easier one to follow than Lee's explanation, is also, and both of them are true, is that in terms of that hot water vacuum breaker, when it was positioned directly about the outlet port from the geyser, in the event of the vacuum breaker leaking and running down that pipe, it went into the cylinder, into the casings, eventually came out through the bottom of the geyser, and the interpretation was that the geyser was burst. So there was a large amount of those, and one of the manufacturers actually started that first by moving it that 200 miles away to alleviate that problem in terms of water entering the tank in the event that the vacuum breaker failed.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Lee. Thanks to the panel. Thanks to all the participants. Is it right you get one CPD point for that, for nothing? In summary, can I just say that the whole issue of standards and what is good for another country is not necessarily good for South Africa. Every country has its own standards, and they are worked on by local people who know the local conditions. So I think let's start accepting that our standards are good. We do draw from overseas. We don't sit in isolation. And for each of us to start encouraging, as I said, the proud plumber idea. And remember, the whole is greater than the parts. And the whole is the plumbing industry, for which we are all part of, and for which we all look to. And we've got to improve it. So that's it. Thanks very much, guys. all your questions, as my second chairman said there, will be answered in writing. Again, thanks panel, and thank you participants.
Thank you, Rory. Thank you, everybody.
Can I just quickly say, yeah, so the questions will be answered. We will reply to them, and we will circulate it to everybody. You will get an email. You'll get a link to this specific webinar. So there were some people asking us for the link that can be distributed to everybody that can look at. We'll provide some of the other links about CPD as well in the same thing, so you can go and look and understand the CPD, because there were a lot of questions about the CPD tonight. We're not going to miss any question. I can assure you we will go for every single question in the specific thing, and I will come back. I wouldn't say I will come back to you personally, but I'll answer every single one. Between Steve and myself, we will give it, and we will circulate back. So there will not be one question that will be missed out in it. We've got most probably about 50 of them odd here that are sitting there. A lot of them are very similar in that specific process. But rest assured, it will be there. And as Rory indicated, you know what, as a whole, we will make a difference. You know, it's not about us individualistic. You know, nobody will look after our sector but ourselves. There's no doubt about it, right? There's no doubt about it. Yes, the debate will be what is best, you know, for the sector as a whole versus an individual. That is always where we're going to clash. But the reality is, guys, nobody's going to look after us other than ourselves as a sector. Thank you very much, Steve, to Rory for your coming and chairing the meeting for us. It was highly appreciated. I hope you enjoyed the first webinar yourself.
Indeed, it's fascinating. Well done on developing this. Good night, all.
Thank you, Rory. Thank you, everybody. Take care, and we will be here for you guys.
There's a survey afterwards, guys. You know, when you log out, please quickly click on the survey. You know, there's 3 questions we're asking, because Rory's only going to be paid if he gets above 50%.
Oh, yeah, please fill it in.
Okay, goodbye, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.